The morning sun spilled through the wide glass windows of Harper's Diner, painting golden streaks across the checkered floor. The place buzzed with energy. The clinking of coffee cups, the hum of conversation, and the sizzle from the kitchen where bacon and pancakes filled the air with their comforting scent. Amid all this cheerful chaos moved Emma Lewis, a waitress known for her soft-spoken kindness and sharp eye for detail. Her dark hair was tied neatly in a ponytail, her apron spotless despite the rush. Every customer she served left with a smile. It wasn't just her service, but the warmth behind it that made people return. Emma had been working there for 3 years, balancing double shifts to pay for her mother's mounting hospital bills. She never complained, never took her frustration out on anyone. She believed kindness was something that cost nothing but meant everything. Her coworkers admired her, though few knew the full story behind her tired eyes. That morning, just as she refilled a coffee pot, the diner doors swung open, and the usual noise dimmed for a brief second. A tall man in an expensive gray suit entered, followed by 2 assistants and a boy who looked barely 12. Emma recognized the man instantly, Richard Hale, the billionaire CEO of Hale Enterprises, a name that often appeared on business headlines. He was known for his ruthless negotiations and perfectionist nature. His presence in a small diner like Harper's drew curious glances from every corner. But Emma's attention wasn't on Richard, it was on his son. The boy's skin was pale, his movements sluggish, and his eyes seemed unfocused. He sat quietly beside his father, hands folded, barely touching the plate that one of the assistants set before him. While Richard talked rapidly on his phone, the boy just stared down at his untouched food. Emma walked over with her usual cheerful tone. "Good morning, sir. What can I get for you and your son?" she asked. Richard didn't look up, muttering something about breakfast and coffee. But as Emma placed the order and looked at the boy again, a wave of worry rippled through her. His lips looked pale, almost grayish, and a faint tremor ran through his hand. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. And though Emma couldn't yet explain it, her instincts whispered that this breakfast was about to change everything. Pure hub kindness. Emma tried to focus on her other tables, but her eyes kept darting back to the boy in the corner booth. He hadn't taken a single bite of his food. The pancakes sat untouched, the syrup slowly dripping down the edges of the plate. His small hands trembled every few seconds, and when he lifted his glass of orange juice, his grip was so weak that it nearly slipped. Emma's heart clenched. She'd seen that look before, the kind of quiet suffering people try to hide because they don't want to be a burden. She approached with gentle steps, refilling Richard's coffee. "Everything all right here?" she asked, her voice light but sincere. Richard barely looked up from his phone. "Yes, fine," he replied curtly, already scrolling through his next meeting notes. But his son winced suddenly, pressing a hand to his side. His face twisted in pain, a small gasp escaping his lips before he tried to hide it. Emma crouched slightly to meet his eyes. "Hey sweetheart, you okay?" she whispered. The boy shook his head, tears glistening as he whispered, "It hurts. Right here." He pointed to the lower right side of his abdomen. Emma's stomach dropped, the same spot her mother used to clutch when her appendix had flared before surgery. "Mr. Hale," Emma said firmly, her tone more serious now. "Your son doesn't look well. Maybe you should get him checked again." Richard sighed, clearly irritated. "We've been to a doctor this morning. They said it's just stomach flu. He'll be fine." Emma frowned, glancing at Ethan again. His breathing was shallow, his forehead damp with sweat, and his skin was losing color fast. "Sir, with respect," she said, her voice steady, "I don't think this is the flu. His symptoms don't match. The pain's too specific. I think it might be appendicitis, and if it bursts..." Richard finally looked up, his sharp eyes narrowing. "You're a waitress," he said skeptically. "What makes you so sure?" Emma met his gaze calmly. "Because I've seen it before. My mom almost died from it." For a moment, silence hung between them. The clatter of the diner faded, replaced by a growing tension. Emma didn't know if he would listen, but she knew one thing for sure. If she stayed silent, the boy might not make it through the day. Richard's expression hardened. He wasn't used to being questioned, especially not by a waitress. "Miss, I appreciate your concern," he said tersely, adjusting his cufflinks. "But my son is under the best medical care money can buy. He'll be fine." His words were clipped, confident, the kind spoken by a man used to controlling every situation. But his voice faltered slightly when Ethan whimpered, clutching his stomach again, his small body curling forward in pain. Emma's heart pounded. She could see how fast his breathing had become, shallow and irregular. Her instincts screamed louder. Now this wasn't something that could wait. Without caring about Richard's wealth or attitude, she gently knelt beside the boy again, ignoring the curious glances of other customers. "Ethan, can you tell me how bad it hurts? Is it sharp or dull?" she asked softly. "Sharp," he whispered, his voice trembling. "It hurts when I move." Emma nodded, her eyes full of empathy. She turned to Richard again. "Sir, please, he needs to go to the hospital right now. If his appendix ruptures, it could be life-threatening." Richard looked torn, his jaw tightening as he stared at his son. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his face. But the doctor said, doctors can be wrong. Emma interrupted gently but firmly. They can't see everything in one checkup. Please, don't wait until it's too late. A bead of sweat trickled down Ethan's temple, and his small hand trembled in Emma's. That was the final sign she needed. Without waiting for permission, she reached for her phone and dialed emergency services. This is Harper's Diner on West Main Street, she said quickly. We have a young boy showing signs of appendicitis. He needs an ambulance immediately. Richard stared at her, momentarily speechless. No one had ever spoken to him with such courage. He wasn't used to compassion that came without expectation, or decisiveness without hesitation. When the sirens grew louder in the distance, Emma soaked a clean towel in cold water and gently pressed it to Ethan's forehead to ease the fever. You're going to be okay, sweetheart, she murmured, brushing his hair back. And for the first time that morning, the billionaire stayed silent, watching as a humble waitress took charge, saving his son's life right before his eyes. Within minutes, the faint wail of sirens grew louder outside the diner. Red and blue lights reflected against the glass windows, casting flashes across the checkered floor. The morning chatter fell silent as paramedics rushed through the door, carrying their equipment. Emma stood up immediately and guided them to the booth where Ethan lay slumped against his father. Richard's confident demeanor had crumbled. His phone was forgotten on the table, his face pale with fear. He's been having sharp pain in the lower right side, Emma explained quickly. He's sweating, breathing fast, and he's weak. I think it's appendicitis. The lead paramedic nodded, already checking Ethan's pulse and abdomen. Good call, he said seriously. You might have just saved this kid. Emma stepped back as they lifted Ethan onto a stretcher. Richard followed closely, visibly shaken. For a man who had conquered boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, he looked utterly powerless. Now, will he be okay? He asked the medic, his voice trembling. We'll do everything we can, sir. But you got lucky someone noticed in time. Emma felt her chest tighten. She watched as the paramedics wheeled Ethan out, the boy's small hand limply hanging off the stretcher. Without thinking, she ran outside, holding the diner door open as they carried him into the waiting ambulance. The morning sunlight felt blinding, the world too bright for such a terrifying moment. She handed Richard the towel she'd used, her hands shaking slightly. Keep this on his forehead, she said softly. Richard hesitated, then took it with a quiet nod. Thank you, he managed to say, his voice cracking. If something happens to him, Emma cut him off gently. He's in good hands now, and you got there just in time. As the ambulance doors closed and the sirens wailed into the distance, Emma stood frozen on the curb. Her apron fluttered in the breeze, her heart pounding with fear and hope. She whispered a silent prayer for the boy she barely knew. When she finally walked back inside, the customers broke into soft murmurs, some in awe, others wiping tears from their eyes. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it. A waitress's quick thinking had just changed a billionaire's world forever. The white halls of St. Mary's Hospital felt endless as Richard Hale paced outside the emergency room, his hands trembling despite his usual composure. The steady beeping of machines and muffled voices from inside only deepened his anxiety. For the first time in years, the man who controlled empires and made headlines felt completely helpless. His mind kept replaying the waitress's voice, calm, certain, and filled with compassion. If it bursts, it could be like... Her words haunted him. 2 hours passed before the doors finally opened. A surgeon stepped out, removing his gloves. Mr. Hale, he said with a tired but reassuring smile, your son's going to be fine. It was a close call. His appendix was about to rupture, but we got to it just in time. Richard's knees nearly gave way with relief. He exhaled shakily, pressing a hand over his face. Thank you, he whispered, but even as gratitude filled him, guilt followed right behind it. He'd been too distracted, too busy to notice what his son was feeling. It wasn't the doctors, the money, or the staff who saved Ethan. It was a diner waitress with more heart than most people he knew. When the nurse finally allowed him into Ethan's room, he saw his son sleeping peacefully, color returning to his cheeks. Richard sat beside him, his eyes misting over as he brushed a hand through Ethan's hair. I'm so sorry, buddy, he murmured. I should have seen it. I should have listened sooner. Later, when Ethan woke up, the first thing he asked was, Dad, is that nice lady okay? Richard smiled faintly. She's fine, and you'll see her again soon. I promise. The next morning, Richard kept that promise. He returned to Harper's Diner, not as a billionaire CEO with assistants and bodyguards, but as a humbled father. The same clinking of cups and chatter filled the place, but it felt different now, warmer, more meaningful. He spotted Emma by the counter, tying her apron, her hair slightly messy from another long shift. She looked up and froze when she saw him. Mr. Hay, is Ethan okay? She asked immediately, her eyes full of genuine concern. Richard smiled for the first time in days. He's safe, he said quietly, because of you. For a long moment, Emma just stood there behind the counter, unsure how to respond. She had expected to hear nothing more after the ambulance sped away. After all, people like Richard Hale lived in a world far above hers. But now, seeing him standing there, in her small diner, humbled and grateful, left her speechless. His expensive suit had been replaced with a simple shirt, his expression soft and human. The air between them felt different, quieter, full of unspoken gratitude. "I don't even know how to thank you," Richard said finally, his voice low. "The doctors told me if we'd waited another 20 minutes, Ethan's appendix would have burst. You didn't just notice, you acted. You saved his life." Emma blushed, shaking her head. "I just did what anyone would have done, sir." Richard smiled faintly. "No," he said, his tone firm but kind. "Most people wouldn't have had the courage to speak up, especially to someone like me." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder, placing it on the counter. Inside was a document, a scholarship offer from the Hale Foundation. "I learned from the hospital that your mother's been ill," he continued softly. "I've taken care of her hospital bills. And this," he gestured toward the papers, "is a full scholarship for you to study nursing. You clearly have the instinct and heart for it." Emma's eyes widened. She covered her mouth, tears welling up. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Just promise me one thing," Richard said gently. "Keep being the kind of person who notices what others don't. The world needs that." She smiled through her tears, nodding. "Only if you promise something too," she replied. "Spend more time with your son. He needs you more than your business ever will." Richard let out a small, emotional laugh. "Deal." The bell above the diner door jingled softly as sunlight poured in, illuminating both of them, the billionaire and the waitress, two strangers, forever connected by one act of courage and kindness. As Richard left, the other customers who'd witnessed everything clapped quietly, their faces touched by the moment. That story spread everywhere, reminding the world that compassion can bridge any distance between hearts. Because this is pure hub kindness.